Today we are going to undertake the disassembly of the Rok Shifter engine. Let's start from the head by loosening the 6 8mm nuts in a crosswise pattern. We then remove the cylinder cover, always applying a crosswise pattern, loosening the 4 8mm nuts. Next, we are going to remove the piston. With a small screwdriver, we are going to remove the ring that keeps it in its position. Now we are going to disassemble the suction unit, which has 6 screws. We have the flange, the rubber manifold, a gasket, the plastic conveyor, and the reed valve pack. The next step is to remove the locking key. For convenience, we can leave the stator attached to the engine. Otherwise, if we want to remove the complete ignition, we need to unscrew the 3 5mm stator screws with a 4mm wrench. For now, we are going to leave it on and just loosen the ignition rotor. Using a screwdriver, we hold the connecting rod and then, using an extractor, we are going to remove the rotor. We are going to use a spacer in order not to damage the crankshaft. Finally, with small pliers, we are going to remove the locking key, and then we can remove the chain sprocket.
Tiriamo via il pignone della catena.
Let's now move to the clutch side. We loosen the 4 screws of the crankcase
del carterino. In seguito le 6 viti
and then the 6 screws of the clutch disc cover. Once the screws have been removed, with the spacers and springs, we remove the clutch disc cover and we slide out the discs with the help of a screwdriver.
tiriamo via lo spingidisco. Possiamo far scivolare fuori i dischi aiutandoci con un cacciavite.
We push out the clutch lifter and we are going to bend the drum nut retainer with a screwdriver and a hammer.
Fermo del dado tamburo con un cacciavite e un martello.
Once we have flattened the drum nut retainer, we are going to unscrew the nut using a 22mm socket wrench. Now we remove the clutch drum and the 3 shim rings.
e i 3 spessori. Possiamo ora
Now we can loosen the 7 screws of the primary transmission cover.
coperchio della trasmissione primaria. Ora con un
Using a screwdriver,
potremo
we will open the primary transmission cover.
aprire il carterino della trasmissione primaria. Ci sono
There are 2 small slots on the cover and the crankcase.
tra il coperchio e il carter. Abbiamo la nostra,
We have our primary transmission with the cover.
tiriamo via
We remove the 2 cages, the bushing, the 2 thrust washers using a pair of Seeger circlip pliers.
ed ora con una pinza pierceger andiamo
We are going to open the primary sprocket Seeger ring.
primario. Sfiliamo
We remove the primary sprocket
primario
and the second 19mm Seeger ring.
e il secondo seger 19.
Next,
Abbiamo ora
we loosen the crankcase screws
le viti del carter.
and the screws on the left side of the crankcase.
Allentiamo ora
Now, let's loosen the 5 screws of the selector's crankcase.
selettore, due viti svasate
2 countersunk screws with a 4mm wrench and the other 5mm screws.
da 5.
Finally, tapping lightly with a small mallet, we are going to slide out the cover. We remove the spacer.
Tiriamo via uno spessore.
Using a pair of seeger pliers, we widen the selector's spring and we slide out the selector's pin.
Facciamo sfilare fuori il perno preselettore.
The cogwheel, and using a 5mm wrench, we are going to loosen the 2 screws of the selector plate support itself.
Porta selettore.
At this point, we are ready to open the crankcase. With a small mallet, we are going to tap on the crankcase and the crankshaft. We slide out the crankshaft, and finally we are going to slide out the gearbox unit by slightly sliding out the first rod fork and then the second.
La prima asta delle forchette e poi la seconda, quella sull'albero primario.
The one on the primary, trying to pull out the complete gearbox.
Completo.
And with this last step, we have completed the disassembly of the Rok Shifter engine.